Hey everybody, welcome again to another episode of the Dad Hat Entertainment News and Reviews podcast, where we'll discuss the world of modern entertainment media, television, video games, and movies. I am your host, Sean Fontaine, along with co-hosts Derek Lloyd.
Hello.
And Jesse Skillings.
Hi.
So, how are you guys doing this past 2 weeks?
All is well with me. It feels like it's been a while since we've recorded. I was missing it. So.
Yeah, it does. We were just saying that, I was saying that to Jesse last night, that it just seems like forever since we last recorded. And I don't know if that's because when we screwed up the first time, we were back-to-back weeks, and then we had the third one. So maybe it just seemed a little less of a wait.
Yep.
Probably.
I've been itching to do the podcast.
Me too.
Well, I've been sick for 2 weeks, so my voice is a little funky, but I'm going to do my best.
I dated myself too and said, "Oh, the Demi Moore kind of voice," and then was probably like, "What? Who?"
I still knew what you meant, at least, so
But and I guess you've been pretty busy, Derek, getting ready for PAX Unplugged.
Yep. We will have. We're prepping. All the product for the event is starting to come in this week, and then next week we'll be prepping that while we also get ready for Black Friday, while we also get ready for Thanksgiving, and then on Monday we'll be packing up a truck, and Tuesday driving to Philadelphia. So there's a lot lined up.
So basically, 2 months. This whole 2 months is going to fly by for you, basically.
Oh yeah, yep, definitely.
And it's crazy. You mentioned that PAX East is coming early.
Yeah, I think this is the first time it's landed this early. Every year they typically go back and forth between March and April. So one year it's March, next year it's April, then back to March. And I guess technically it's still in March, but it begins the last week of February or the last few days of February. So usually I need a few months in between these things to totally recover, but that's going to just barely do it, and I'll finally feel human again, and then it'll be time to do PAX East. So
then you're going to cocoon yourself into a hole for the next week or 2 weeks afterwards, and just be like, I have to recharge.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to need a vacation at the end of all that.
Nice. So this week we have a new lineup of things to check out. We are going to talk to Jesse about Charmed, the remake that's on Netflix. I'm going to be going into not so much of a deep dive, but sort of skimming the surface of Death Stranding, and I'll explain that a little more when I get to my segment. And Derek is going to be covering the movie Dr. Sleep, which I can't wait to talk to you about because I saw it just the other night. I'm like, oh, there's something I want to talk about.
Nice.
But before we got into that, I want to do our monthly shout out for any active Patreons that have jumped on in the month of November. And we have another new Patreon, Michael Simon. Thank you very much for becoming a Patreon and contributing to what we're doing here. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I know Mike. Thanks, Mike.
That's awesome. Is he one of your gamer guys?
Yeah, I've known Mike for a few years. I met him through a mutual friend, Matt McGregor, that I met looking for D&D players in the mid-90s. And I found Matt, and through Matt, I ended up meeting Mike and a bunch of his other friends. And yeah, great guys.
Nice. And apparently he likes what we're doing. So
Mike, if you're listening, I got an ice cream cone for you.
You better have some for us at PAX. If you want to support our podcast as a Patreon to donate, you can do so at patreon.com/dadhatnewsandreviews. It only takes $1 a month as a pledge to become a Patreon, and it would help us out immensely. If not, we know that sometimes people can't afford to put the money into things like this. So just being a listener really helps us a lot. And if you could give us any reviews or comments or click on any stars for ratings, we would appreciate that as well. Thank you. So also I'd like to mention that if you're a potential sponsor and you'd like us to talk about your product or service, we have space here on the podcast. You can contact us at dadhatnewsandreviews@gmail.com to set that up. And we'd love to pitch anything that you're selling. So moving forward, there was a couple of news stories that I was looking at, and I passed a couple of them past you guys. I think we landed on the one about Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the Star Trek movie that had been benched because I think they said they couldn't nail down the main actors, like Christopher Pine and Chris Hemsworth were planning to be in the next movie. That fell through, and apparently there was doubt as to whether they were going to make another Star Trek movie, but apparently it's back on. So Chris Pine has signed back on, and they have Noah Hawley directing, which I guess he is the creator of Legion, a TV show, isn't it like a spinoff of the X-Men?
So yeah, I've watched an episode or two. Yeah, it is.
So what do you guys think about anything about that? Is it anything that interests you, or?
I mean, I'm always gonna go see a Star Trek film, so I feel like I'll probably end up seeing it. I like the reboot cast. I didn't at first, but I think they've done a good job, and I was happy to see that they weren't going to be recasting Chekhov's role.
Yeah, I was wondering how they're going to handle that.
Yeah, it looks like he's just not going to appear, which I think is better, honestly.
So I wonder if they're going to just kind of have him not be around and not even mention it, or if they're going to have something in the story where they sort of say, well, Chekhov is on assignment, or do they just actually kill him off screen?
Yeah, I wonder. But I'm always there for Star Trek, so.
And are you a Star Trek fan, Derek?
I am, yeah. I'm a little behind, so I think if I have to pick my favorite stuff, it's the old classic. I actually think my favorite stuff at the classic character movies, the films. That's where I definitely spent most of my time with Star Trek. I had always, when I was a kid, I'd see some of the shows, but maybe at the time it was a little too dry for me. I didn't dislike it. I just didn't completely fall in love with it when I was younger. And then the movies drew me to it a little more closely. And then I went back and watched a lot of the episodes. And I recently got it in my head. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna watch, because they're on Netflix, I think still. Are they still in their entirety?
Yeah, I think all of the series are.
I think you're right. So I decided I was going to go back and watch the originals, and I got as far as the first 2 or 3 episodes and just got sidetracked. It wasn't that I didn't like them. I had never seen the pilot episode with the different captain. Who was that? What was it wasn't Kirk, right? They had another name.
Supposed to be Pike.
Pike, that's it. Yeah.
I don't know why I know that.
So yeah,
I know.
Yeah. But I think I'm at least 2 films behind with the most recent. Have there been 3 with the new cast?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I only had seen the first one, and I liked it. I just I don't know. I just didn't catch the other ones for whatever reason.
Liked the first one, but honestly, and like I'll see the fourth, but the second and third weren't as good.
Okay.
I don't think. I kind of, the plots get interchangeable for me.
Yeah.
With the second and third.
And they also are they're inevitably going to be held up to the originals too, right? Like Khan is going to be compared to previous Khans and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to avoid, even though they rebooted the entire timeline and everything.
Right.
Which is also interesting, because the idea that they were going to have Chris Hemsworth in the next movie sort of lent to the idea that they were possibly going to do another time travel element. And I think too much time travel in movies or any kind of fiction just sort of kind of muddies the waters a little too much.
There's a couple of theories that we're about to get some time travel in. This is non-spoiler. It's just people talking. I haven't read anything that's like specific about this, but there's a few people out there who are speculating that Rise of Skywalker is going to do a time jump thing or something like that.
Oh.
I don't think I like the idea of time travel in the Star Wars universe.
I don't either. But we maybe served it.
I mean, it was fine for Star Trek because they did a nice job, I think, in the reboots of explaining how it affected the timelines and why we have the new set of movies, and it's and they've had time travel in the original series. The City on the Edge of Tomorrow, I think, was one of the episodes that had the archway, and they could travel back into like old. They always seem to go back into like mobster San Francisco, like in the 40s. That's pretty much the only place they could go. Yeah. But but
Costume
they,
wise.
right. But anyway, they had the concept of time travel, and they did the search for Spock, or was it the search for Spock that they went back? Yeah, I think so.
Yep, episode that was the fourth one, I think. Yeah,
and they had time travel there. So time travel has basically become canon in the Star Trek universe.
That movie is such a guilty pleasure for me.
That's my favorite movie.
I love it.
Love it so much.
It is really fun to watch, and I love all the one-liners that all the characters get to do.
Double dumbass on you.
I know he's trying to be as mean as possible.
Mm-hmm.
My kids just call it the whale one.
Yeah,
the whale one.
And then you have Scotty going computer.
Yeah,
but he was ahead of his time. If it was now, he'd be talking to Siri or Alexa.
How quaint.
Oh, mouse. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't think they're going the time travel route now that I haven't seen that Chris Hemsworth is signed on for Star Trek 4. But yeah, I'm always game for a Star Trek movie. I'd be interested to watch it.
Yep.
So we are going to, I think, jump right into Jesse's segment. You were going to interview. You were going to review the new Charmed.
Yeah. So I do have to say that I didn't watch all of the original one before watching this one. I had watched some of it here and there when I was younger. It wasn't, I preferred Buffy and Angel and stuff like that. I didn't really watch a lot of Charmed, but enough to get the plot. So when this one popped up on the screen, I was like, well, I'll give the new one a chance. I enjoy the plot. I think the story is good. It seems a little different from the story of the first one. And a little more, it's very Monster of the Week, but it also has a flow to it that's telling a good tale in the first season. So I enjoyed that. The actresses are good. I think that they play their roles well. They've got the three sisters again. This time one of them is a half sister. And it's funny and cute and but like I was saying earlier when I was debating if I should even review it, a lot of the plot gets kind of lost to the push for very overly feminist comments, I feel like. There's so the first episode is good. It draws you in, it's telling a story, it's enjoyable. But in the first just few minutes, you can tell that the older sister doesn't approve of the younger sister rushing this sorority. So she goes to take her from a party and go home to meet with their mom about something. And the younger sister is so embarrassed that her sister is showing up to get her. And so the older sister decides to use the line, "Oh, that's okay. I'll just hang out here, engage with these young men about a discussion with rape culture." Mm. And her sister kind of drags her out, and it kind of takes me out of the story a little bit when there's so much push on some of the lines. Some of the lines are awkward feeling. So that was kind of my only complaint about it, was the story was so enjoyable, and then I felt kind of taken out of it when there were such cheesy lines. That was definitely not the worst one.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys had a chance to even, watch the first episode or anything, but
I did not, unfortunately. I have to confess a nearly zero connection to the Charmed stuff. I didn't see any of the first series. I knew of it. I know about it, but I did. Have you seen a lot of both?
I have now, because I went back and rewatched, and I was like, oh, I remember this from when I was younger. And then I watched almost the whole first season of this one.
Does it feel very remake-ish, or is it like they're going in their own direction and just taking the core idea?
I feel like they took the core idea. They do have a different story. So it's different enough. I know the original actresses were kind of upset that they weren't even collaborated with on it. And when it was advertised as a feminist reboot, they were like, well, was the first one not feminist enough? So it was kind of, they all decided to give it a chance, but it sounded like they kind of stepped on some toes there too.
Was it literally touted as a feminist reboot?
It was every article I looked up about it was, oh, the feminist reboot of Charmed, and so the Holly Combs, who played I believe the oldest sister Piper on the original one, was pretty upset about it on Twitter and complaining about all the work that they had put in and not being consulted, and then were we not feminist enough, and
Huh.
said it was pretty much the opposite of feminism to not even involve the other actresses because they were too old now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, it was kind of interesting reading their takes on it.
Was Shannon Doherty in the original?
She was. They killed her off because of disagreements with I think the director or somebody in the production part of it.
Yeah.
And then they brought in Rose McGowan as
Okay.
half sister, another full. I don't remember.
It's funny. I never really watched the original. I haven't seen any of the new one because, again, I don't have Netflix right now. But I always originally thought that it was sort of like a spin-off from the Buffyverse. It almost seemed like that sort of like show to me. And I was like, that's the only reason it sort of interested me, but I never got to watch it. So, but they're not connected at all, right?
They're not. They go together well, but I don't believe they had any crossover at all. Not like Angel and Buffy or something like that. So,
and that was late 90s, right? The first one, I think.
Yes,
90,
I think it started in, I want to say 98.
98. Yeah, I think that's right.
And it went to 2005 or something. It went a while.
And that was post Scream, right? Where Rose McGowan kind of got her foothold.
I'm pretty sure. Because the Scream movies came out in the late 90s, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it must have been right on the tail end of that.
Yeah, 96 was Scream. Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So overall, do you think Charmed is for a specific audience, or do you think it's good for just most sci-fi or horror fans? Or
I think if you can get past some of the dialogue, it could be enjoyable for anybody. My husband watched a few episodes with me, and he kind of said the same thing. He was like, I really want to enjoy this plot, and I like the story that they're telling, but it's really weird to hear, like, she throws a monster off of her and that was going to kiss her, and she's like, I can take back my consent anytime I want. Like, who's going to say that when they are fighting a monster?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was just it took you out of it so fast, and you were just like, oh God.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
and I don't mind, to be very clear, don't mind, feminism, of course, but when it takes you out of the story, I feel like there were more subtle ways to put that in there. Like they had a protest against a teacher who had been accused of sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Peaceful protests. Put that in.
Right.
The lines were a little difficult. Other than that, I think the story is good for anybody. It's enjoyable. It's very supernatural feel, monster of the week, good stuff.
Cool.
What about show production? Is it pretty cool to look at?
It's not bad. I did note to Kyle when I was watching it with him, I was like, it's amazing that they've taken the same cheesiness from the 90s show and put it into the 2019 show. Because some of the special effects are a little cringeworthy, and there was one point where we were like, oh, it's the Night King. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not terrible. It's enjoyable to watch.
It's funny. I almost feel like if you give me, I don't know what the time would be, 15 minutes, about 15 minutes or so, if I didn't know if something was a movie, like a film or a TV show, I feel like in 15 minutes, I can almost always tell because of how the dialogue is delivered. Just that. Maybe I don't even have to see the show. I think I could just hear it. I'm watching Mindhunter right now, which took me about 2 episodes. Well, I guess by the second episode I was all in, but the first episode, I feel like a lot of the dialogue, it has that, I don't know, sometimes in TV shows, you ever notice how it almost feels like the two actors they've memorized their lines, and I just get the feeling that they're just waiting for the other person to finish what they're saying so they can then deliver their line. And you see a little bit less of that in film. Maybe they just have a different time schedule where they can do way more takes and all that sort of stuff. But I always feel like there's it's almost like I memorized your lines and my lines, And I know when I come in, as soon as you finish saying what you're saying, and the dialogue ends up feeling a little bit too like stunted, or like you pointed out, they have these little throwaway lines occasionally that are, I don't know, they just
cheesy.
Yeah, they kind of take you out of the immersion because you're like, people wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't talk like that.
No, that's a good point. And this Charm definitely has that feel where, when the sisters are talking, it's, oh, that was your line. Okay, here's my line.
Right.
And they're not bad actresses. They're doing a good job, and
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. But yes, you can definitely tell the production of, TV versus movie, and
I wonder if that's more on the director or the actor.
It might be a time.
know.
I think it's probably it might be related to a time thing. Like if you're filming a movie, I know that they're on schedules, but if you're, I mean, not to bring it to my segment too early, but Kubrick is famous for, his thing on The Shining, where he would make people film scenes 150 times. I know that's on the extreme end, but he was famous for his perfectionism in films. And I you have a director like Kubrick that can kind of command any amount of time that he wanted when he would make a movie, whereas a TV show has a very strict production schedule and people show up for work every week and they just don't have that kind of a time thing. So I think it probably might have a lot to do with that, because like you said, they're great actresses who great actors who are able to perform at the level I'm talking about in a film, but once they go to TV, it just feels shortened in a way that like they probably just have less time.
One of the worst shows that is an example of that, I think, is Gilmore Girls. Has anyone ever watched that?
I love that show.
I don't think I have. If I have, I don't recall.
So you know what I'm talking about, Jesse. With
I do. It's no 16-year-old, no matter how smart they are, is going to talk that way, but it's still such a guilty pleasure show.
But everybody in the show talks like that. It's like,
you're right. Yeah.
It's
definitely
talk a mile a
very-
minute, talk immediately after the other person's done talking, and try to sound like a clever person.
I do that every day. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh boy. But that's definitely something that you can tell from TV to movies, I guess. Yeah. So since you mentioned the contrast, actually before that, was there any final recommendation for that, Jesse?
Oh, for Charmed? I would recommend it, and I plan to watch more and give it more of a chance. I do hope some of the cheesy lines die down a bit, and I think just feminism should be about equality, and in this show it seems more like girls good, boys bad. So I don't think I'd watch it with my sons, honestly, or my daughter right now. I think they're a little young to pick out the nuances of that might not be okay. So
divisive, to be sure.
yeah, kind of divisive. I see it that way anyway.
What's available for seasons right now?
Just one so far.
Okay.
Yes.
So why don't we switch it up? And why don't we have you, Derek, jump into the movies this time?
Sure. Yeah, we can definitely do that. So I'm reviewing Dr. Sleep, which I have just freshly seen. I think it was 2 days ago I went to see it and gave myself a day to reflect and then write up some stuff about it. It's directed by Mike Flanagan, who I admittedly hadn't really heard of, although I had heard a few of his projects prior, but his name didn't jump out at me prior to this. He did, I guess he's most famous for his work that he did on the Haunting of Hill House episodes, which I admittedly have never seen. He also, I guess that I looked at his resume, and the two movies that jumped out that I had actually heard of. One is Ouija, Origin of Evil. There's a colon in there if you Origin of Evil. Yeah, I don't know. But and the other movie that I want to see really bad because I read the book and loved it, and I haven't seen it. It was a Netflix movie. It's Gerald's Game. Have either of you seen that or know about it?
I haven't. No.
So it's also based on a Stephen King novel, and just one of his smaller, lesser known books, but I really think it was one of the creepiest books I've ever read. So I kind of always wanted to see it. It's a tough movie to represent on screen because the primary the actor is basically a huge portion of the book is a woman who's been handcuffed to a bed, and she's in a place where no one is going to come looking for her. She had kind of gone away on a secret getaway with her husband, and ends up getting handcuffed to this bed, and he dies, and she's left in this room to try to survive. But the book goes off in weird places, so I always wanted to see the movie version of it, because I was like, how do you do that? How do you do a whole movie about this person chained to a bed? So anyway, that's one of his other movies, but I hadn't seen it yet. So I came to this not knowing what to expect, because I didn't have any really work that he had seen to compare it to. All I had was The Shining, which Dr. Sleep is the sequel to. And it's really strange, because Stephen King is very famous for having been very vocal about his dislike of The Shining, the movie that was directed by Stanley Kubrick in 1980, which is interesting because I have read The Shining, the book, and I find it one of the few times in my life I've ever said that I actually like the film better than the book. It's almost always the other way around. I think most people find that to be the case. But I thought Kubrick's vision of this story, I just liked it better. And will get into why a little bit later. But so Stephen King's been very vocal about how much he dislikes it. I think there's a quote I read from him once saying that he thinks that Stanley Kubrick is trying to hurt people with this movie. And I don't know exactly what that meant. I have some ideas, but
him.
Yeah. So this movie has a really difficult starting point. It needs to be a sequel to the Shining novel written by Stephen King, because Dr. Sleep is also a sequel book written by Stephen King. But it's a sequel to his book, not to Kubrick's movie. But almost everybody has seen the movie and expects this to be a sequel to the film. And there's some fundamental differences. Like at the end of The Shining, the book, the Outlook Hotel is burned to the ground. But at the end of the movie The Shining, it's just sort of that's not what happens. It's sort of just abandoned. So right off the bat, he's got a tough place to go from there. But I wanted to mention a few of those things before I just walk us through some of the early parts of the plot. So the movie's starring Ewan McGregor, who I was happy to see. I feel like I haven't seen him in something new that I really enjoyed for a while. I think everybody knows his resume pretty well. It also stars a woman named Rebecca Ferguson, who I didn't realize that I knew. She's in The Greatest Showman, and she's also in several of the Mission Impossible sequels.
Who does she play in The Greatest Showman?
I can't remember the character's name, but it's...
is she the singer?
Yeah, I believe she is one of them.
Okay.
Maybe we can check that in a minute and see. But sure. And then there's also a newcomer, a young girl named Kylie Curran, who's awesome in this movie. This was her first role of note. She had done a few small things, but I don't think anybody would know. And then there's a sort of a secondary actor, Cliff Curtis, who people will absolutely recognize as that guy. They've seen him in a bunch of movies. They'll recognize his face, but he hasn't really had a good, strong leading role that I could think of. He's in The Piano, Three Kings, The Insider, Blow, Training Day, which I think is his best role, The Majestic, The Fountain, Sunshine, and he's apparently, with a little research, I saw that he's in the upcoming Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Wow.
So, however we think about that. But yeah, in Training Day, he's the gangster that sort of holds Ethan Hawke when he's got him captured in that really tense scene, and he's holding him down to the bathtub. He's about to blow his brains out, and he's the sort of the lead gangster. He was awesome.
Okay, I remember him.
People will recognize him from that.
Does he play Crow Daddy?
He does not play Crow Daddy. No, Crow Daddy is one of the villain guys. Are you wondering who he is in the? You did see it. You said.
Yeah.
No, he plays his friend, who Ewan McGregor befriends. The guy who befriends him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep. So Dr. Sleep picks up the story of Danny Torrance, played by Ewan McGregor, who's the young boy who survived the events of The Shining in the 1980 film. His past trauma and the residue from his not so latent powers have landed him in this like really sorry condition. He's homeless. He's a drunk. He's spiraling downward into like this self-destructive cycle. And we're introduced to him in the middle of one of these low points. He's like awakened in the bed of a woman that he hardly knows after a rough night of drinking and fighting at some seedy bar. And it's sort of told to us through like really rapid flashbacks. There's like, he awakens in this bed and there's like a dried pile of vomit occupying the space between him and this woman he doesn't know. And it's just gross kind of awakening. And he's got no money in his wallet, but she has a bit in her pocketbook. So he helps himself to it amid a series of excuses that he offers up to one of his past ghosts that appears to reprimand him. And that's Dick Halloran, who was the chef of the infamous Overlook Hotel that died during The Shining. Remember the guy who also had The Shining, and he helps Danny. It was played by Scatman Crothers. Awesome character too. And this guy really does channel him pretty well. It's a different actor, obviously, because Scatman died in, I think, 1986. But this guy does a really good job. Maybe he doesn't look exactly like him, that odd look that Scatman Crothers had, but this guy does his voice really well, and you know immediately it's who it is, even though it's a different actor, many years later. Danny, despite the reprimand from this ghost, he keeps the money and slinks out of the apartment, not before he learns one more really ugly truth about the low point that he's arrived at. I don't want to spoil that, but it's sort of a rough setup for an even rougher conclusion there. You'll know what I'm talking about if you see the movie. It's pretty ugly. But it's safe to say that all this is Danny's low point, and the film will progress from there as he struggles to get himself together. He relocates to another town in another state, and he begins to like heal his broken spirit. And it was hard to tell what kind of movie that we're in for with this setup, because I was really surprised where the movie went. It definitely functions as like a great and respectful homage to its predecessor, which is definitely one of the all-time best horror films ever. But it really does become its own story. It's not at all trying to rehash or recreate the first film. It's much more of like a logical continuation of where the characters land after all these years have gone by. And over the years, Danny's come across others who've possessed powers similar to his own, which we would expect that might happen. Though it's clear that his attunement was of an exceptionally powerful sort. And in this small New Hampshire town he's relocated to, he comes into contact through his powers, another precognitive person, a young teenage girl named Abra, played by Kylie Curran. And she also possesses uncanny powers similar to his own, but probably even more powerful, you're led to believe. And then tangential to all these plot lines is the unexpected direction of the film. And what I hadn't anticipated is that Dr. Sleep is actually somewhat of like a vampire movie, sort of. Just as there are those in the world with powers like Danny and Abra, there's also predators who pursue people like them. And these predators are like practically ageless like a vampire. And they live on through the centuries, feeding off of people's shining ability, which they extract from them through terror, torture, and murder. So the longer their prey suffers, the more what they call steam they release, which they like will greedily consume as it like floats out of their dying bodies. So they capture people, they terrify them, they hurt them horribly, torture them. And as all this is going on, it's like the spirit of the creature or the person is coming out of them, and they just consume it. So it's very vampiric and pulls from a lot of the stuff we've seen from old vampire films, and in a good way. The movie pulls absolutely no punches in its depiction of how this particular group of predators operates. They call themselves the True Knot, K-N-O-T, and they are shepherded across the country like nomadic cultists by their leader, a woman known as Rose the Hat, played by Rebecca Ferguson. She's like seductive and evil. She's uses her like youthful beauty to like sort of entrap people, but all that's belied by this like she has this like sinister sort of wisdom that seems to guide her, and all of the other members of the True Knot sort of look to her as their guidance. And you get the impression that maybe she is, if not the most powerful of them, she seems to possess a particular power that allows her to track down other people that have the Shining. So she's kind of like the lead hunter, so it seems as though her power is specifically attuned to that, like locating other people that they can feast upon. One of the kills that the group makes is really, really unsettling, practically guaranteed to stay with you after the film has ended, which is, I think, appropriate for a sequel to The Shining, which tends to stay with people after they see it for the first time. And the director, Flanagan, really handles all that material pretty deftly. He leaves by the wayside like all the pathetic jump scare routines that a lot of lesser horror movies constantly demean themselves with, especially lately. I mean, even in trailers for new horror movies, it's like, I'm waiting for the last 2 minutes. The last minute of the trailer where they have like, the credits come up, but then they come back for one more. Even the trailer is doing a jump scare.
True.
So sick of it. But Dr. Sleep is a really mature horror film, and it holds a reverence for the source material, but it doesn't stoop to copying or rehashing it. It's very, very much its own thing. The acting's all very good. Particularly, I thought Ewan McGregor, who maybe didn't have a lot to work with. It's definitely a quiet character, but I thought he did a great job with what he had. And the young girl, Kylie Curran, does an amazing job. Rebecca Ferguson is amazing as Rose the Hat. So those are the three top people for sure. Mm-hmm. The soundtrack's also really good, if not memorable. It leads us through scenes with the sound of like an ominous heartbeat, which happened with The Shining. Used that a lot too, and it's cool. It almost like sets the scene for how you should feel based on the speed of the heartbeat. It's really good. And I really loved the job that Danny finds himself in once he begins to clean up his act, and that he provides like a healthy service for his powers, and it's what ends up in the movie earning him the name Dr. Sleep. And I'll let you see that in the film rather than spoil it. And I'll also leave the film's real conflict for you to enjoy for yourself. King fans will definitely find a lot to love here, including a couple of really cool references to his Dark Tower series and some of his other novels too. But yeah, I'd probably land it at out of 5 stars. Let's see, I'd probably go. It's definitely 3.5, and I'm going to give it a little bit of time before I drop a 4-star on it. But I would absolutely watch it again. Very easy to recommend it, and if you're a fan of the books or the movies or any combination of them, you should definitely see it.
I so wish this was a spoiler cast because I want to really get into it, but
let's dance around it a little bit. I'm interested to hear it. And like, what is there a particular part that you?
There's maybe one or two particular things that really stood out to me that I wanted to discuss with you about. And but backing up from that, in general, I was very surprised, like you said, where the movie goes in a direction I wasn't really expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even really consider it so much a horror movie as sort of like a suspenseful action thriller.
Yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. I mean, there are definitely elements of horror. I mean, that scene with the baseball kid is really rough.
That was brutal.
Yeah.
And I bet just anyone with kids watching that must have been like, oh my God.
I was like I was like, please, like mercifully end this scene. It was so rough.
So that sounds great.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
If that's what you're into, which you're hopefully not. But so yeah, I liked the direction the movie went into, because I'm all about like people with powers and abilities going against each other in battle almost,
Yeah.
I love that sort of aspect of it.
Yeah.
And but I did sort of see where it was going. Like once they made that turn, I knew why things were going to happen and where things were going to happen. You know what I mean?
I agree with that 100%. Yep, definitely. I knew where the last scenes would be filmed.
Yeah. And it was pretty obvious what the setup was setting up. I do like how they enacted it, at the end. And I do like the twist at the beginning of how Danny Torrance was taught to deal with his emotional quote unquote demons.
Yeah, it was very cool. And I got to say, how awesome was that actress who they sort of cast? Her name is Alex Esso. She channels Shelley Duvall so amazingly.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, that was creepy.
Unbelievable. It sounded like her. I mean, Shelley Duvall has such a unique look to her. I can't say that it looked exactly like her. It looked close enough where you were like, okay, that's who that's supposed to be. Especially with the blue bathrobe. They had her the same blue bathrobe. I'm like, okay. But
she was great.
She sounded just like her. I don't know if they used any trickery there, but man, I was like, holy crap, that sounds just like her.
She definitely sold me on her being that character.
Yeah.
Which brings me to one of the 2 points, or one of the couple of points that I wanted to discuss with you was there was a reveal of a character later on.
Yep.
A major character.
Yep.
From The Shining.
Yep.
And it sort of took me right out of it. Like as soon as I saw,
because it was so much not him.
Yeah.
You know who that actor was?
No.
It's Henry Thomas. It's E.T. The boy from E.T.
What?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm looking at him. I'm like, I know this guy, but they obviously did some work to kind of make him. We can come out and say it here. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler because you don't really know if you're getting it in a flashback or something present in the plot. But he's playing a visualized version of Jack Torrance, the father from The Shining. I think it's okay to say that. It's not really clear. There's no spoiler here. It could be a flashback we're talking about or whatever. But yeah, it's played by Henry Thomas. And I got home. I'm like, I had to see who that was. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
Like his acting was fine. And even like when he started getting into that guttural voice at the end, it was pretty good. But his face, it's just like, that's not Jack Torrance. It totally just threw me out of it. And I'm like, could they have done anything? Like maybe just keep him off screen, like the face, or just use the voice, or even like, why didn't they do something like in the Terminator where they have CG that they can recreate anybody's face?
Yeah. I wish they went a little bit of an extra mile there too. Like, especially with the voice, because he's so distinctly himself,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
You guys mentioned Gerald's Game too, right? In
Yes.
So he was in that as well? The Henry Thomas? It looks like.
Was he?
Yeah.
Really?
Because I mean I know him from, like oh my word, Gangs of New York and
Yes, yep.
Legends of the Fall. And stuff.
That's right.
Like that.
Yep.
But yeah, he was in that, and he was also in the Ouija one.
Oh wow. I didn't know he was in Gerald's Game. I mean, I haven't seen it yet. That's like on my list of must-sees, but that's cool. I wonder who he is. There's not a lot of options for characters in there. But
I mean, it says it here, but I don't know if you want me to.
Oh, I do see it says Tom. I don't know who that is. Okay. All right. That's cool.
So yeah, that's sort of I didn't like that I didn't have enough suspension of disbelief to make him seem more like Jack Torrance. But that's sort of just one little pet peeve.
And I think that was one of there were three characters that were sort of shown either in flashback or some kind of present connection scene. And one was Carl Lumbly, who plays the Dick Halloran character, who I did immediately go along with. Did that work for you?
Yeah, that didn't bother me at all.
And then the woman, Alex Esso, who played Shelley Duvall, I thought was as perfect as you could have asked for. I mean,
yeah, she was fine as that character. And did you notice that they actually used an actual cut from the original?
Which cut?
The bathroom scene with the axe.
Oh yeah,
there was like a 3 or 4 second cut to actual Shelley Duvall screaming with Jack coming through the door.
Are you 100% sure that it was Shelley Duvall and not the other actress reshot?
I think that's what I read. That they
did use it.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, the shot's so quick with the axe coming through the door. I was like, was that her, or did they refilm that scene for it? But
right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And what did you think about the using the hotel as a backdrop for the final confrontation.
Well, I knew it was coming, and so I can't say I was surprised about that. It was cool. Maybe if I'm going to be critical at all, I think the last act of the movie is where I actually feel like it. This sounds silly because it's where it actually picks up speed and brings you to its like, sort of the action like conclusion of the film. But I feel as though that's where I was least connected to the movie. I really like slow moving stuff, especially with my horror. I like the cerebral aspect of horror movies more than I like the I'm getting chased around by monsters and ghosts stuff. It does a lot more to me. When I go to a movie, I just want to feel something. And I don't so much care what you make me feel. I just don't want to be numbed into some, big spectacle that doesn't. I'm like so crazy that I have trouble connecting with it. You know what I mean? I want to feel that. I mentioned that in one of the previous podcasts, and the differences between like the car hanging off the edge in Terminator Dark Fate, as opposed to like Steven Spielberg's direction in Jurassic Park, where it's very similar, the car hanging off the edge. You feel so grounded in that scene, like you're there. But the more special effects you add, the more suspension of disbelief. It like leads you into this uncanny valley where I don't know. It's hard for me to stay connected to that stuff. So the first 2/3 of the movie are all very sort of, with a couple exceptions. Like there's the astral travel, which I thought was awesome.
Oh yeah,
that was really cool.
Well done. Yeah. Have you seen the movie It Follows?
I consider that to be it's definitely in my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time. Nice. I could do an entire podcast of my assessment of what that movie's true meaning is. Every time someone goes off on how it's about sexually transmitted diseases, I want to lose my mind. I'm like, that is not at all what that movie is about. That's what they're throwing at you to make you think that's what it is. That movie is 100% about bad parenting and the results of bad parenting. I love that movie.
And that slow pace that you were talking about, that does it perfectly, obviously.
Awesome.
Like it's literally what the monster does.
It Follows was made for me. That director knows me, and he's like, I'm going to make a movie for Derek Lloyd, and here you go, buddy. And I was like, that movie blew me away.
So yes, you've seen it. God.
Yes, have seen it. Must talk more.
I have not even heard of that one. It's a horror movie, you said, right?
It's a horror movie, but not. It's when you sort of talked about some of the things that you don't like. Although maybe like it certainly is an anxiety producing movie. Ooh. But it's not gross. It doesn't have like a lot of gore, not at all. In fact, I can't think of a single scene. Can you, Sean, where there's like gore?
Just the very beginning with the girl like sort of twisted as a pretzel.
Yeah.
But not even barely.
Like body twisting stuff is so weird to me. My God. When people walk down the stairs backwards and stuff, oh my God, I freak out. I can't.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you can take it, I'm tempted to recommend it. You should definitely, if you can handle that stuff at all. I think it's one of the best horror movies ever.
Really,
like, really leaves you thinking about it when it's over.
I'm all for intelligent movies, and it sounds like this is one of them.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, I would be open to watching. Maybe I'll just pop a Xanax and watch it behind my head.
And how you said that it's anxiety building. I mean, the whole movie is basically the buildup. Like it's an entire buildup, constantly building up.
Yep.
And I love that.
It's also like set in a never time, like an impossible time. It doesn't exist in a it's so well done. Like you can't tell if it's intentionally, you can't tell if it's the 80s, the 70s, the 90s, or like the aughts. You are totally lost as to where you are. Like you get the feeling like all the inside of someone's house is decorated very much like an 80s bedroom might look like, for example. The big shade on the lamp and like a poster on the wall that's something from the 80s. You go outside though, and the cars are like from the 70s, and yet they might be watching something on television that's from the 60s, but then there's something else from like current day. They're talking on cell phones. Mm-hmm. It's so awesome. Like you're it's like I don't know. It's like another plane of existence, but it's so subtly done that it's not distracting. It just it unsettles you on a level that you're like,
because you can't quite place yourself.
Yeah, it's upsetting.
Oh, and to get back to the Dr. Sleep, I did look up Rebecca Ferguson, and she is Jenny Lind in The Greatest Showman. So
cool.
if anybody enjoyed her, it sounds like this is a very different role for her.
Very much so.
So
I love the role she played in this. I mean, she was really awesome.
Yep, very, very cool.
I like her as an actress. I haven't seen Dr. Sleep. Like I said, I'm not really one for horror movies. They freak me out, but I like her a lot. So sounds like she has an interesting role.
Definitely. There's one thing too. I want to dodge spoiler stuff here, but I wanted to mention it to you, Sean. Did you feel as though there was a little lack of clarity on? So I don't want to get too spoiler here, but so I guess when we watch the movie, you know that she's going to be one of the main villains. I mean, you know that. So I think letting people know that she'll be around towards the last act of the movie is not too much of a spoiler. But when she decides she's going to go after them, I'm a little unclear on what she thought she was going to do. Like, her powers seem very clearly about being able to reach out and detect things, or how she gets on top of the roof of her RV and she's sort of just connecting astrally, looking for people to hunt. It wasn't really clear to me what her offensive powers were.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I mean, I don't think she could have done anything particularly in the physical realm. I mean, and like there's that sort of hand-to-hand combat scene where she sort of gets the upper hand, and that's just like normal fighting. You know, that's nothing that a superpowered being would have the upper hand. Like, it didn't seem like that.
Right.
I think they kind of allude to the fact that she has very powerful psychic combative abilities, maybe. And like, you kind of see that. Remember where I was talking about how Danny deals with his inner demons, and they try to pull that on her, and she's just like,
right.
So I don't know. I think that's probably how they sort of. But then you think, why didn't she just do it at the RV camp? Why did she have to physically travel all the way there?
Yeah. It seemed like she was sort of like putting herself into a really risky situation based on what she had seen prior to, But it's okay. I mean, I think that the movie tries to like get you past that by having her juice up on the steam that she had stored away there. I mean, she was sucking all that stuff in. I was like, okay, curious to see how this manifests in power, But I mean, I think that's just, maybe it was just about her confidence or something like that. But.
And it did show that she healed from it too, physically.
That's true. Yeah. I guess that's probably what it was. Is she probably felt as though if it got to a physical combat, she'd be able to outlast them. Maybe that's really what it was.
Right. So
a couple of interesting little bits of trivia too that I came across, and I always try to like read some of this stuff and look for cool little things that I missed. Danny Lloyd, who that's the name of the actor who played young Danny in the original Shining, he has a cameo, and I wouldn't have known it, I think, if I had seen it anyway. But he's in the baseball game. I guess he's listed as one of the credits as a spectator. So he's somewhere in the audience watching in that scene. So I'm looking forward to see it again to see if I can pick him out. A couple of other things too. The office in which Ewan McGregor, older Danny, the office in which he's interviewed for the orderly position that he ends up taking is a replica of the same office that Jack Nicholson's character was interviewed in the caretaker job in The Shining.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And also sort of funny is while he's waiting to go into that, he's reading a magazine, and it's sort of a famous thing from the original Shining. Some people love to read into these alternate possible meanings for The Shining. And one of them is sort of like some kind of implied anxiety over the sexual orientation of Jack Torrance. Because he's in the office waiting to be interviewed, and he's reading a Playgirl magazine in the original, it's like a 1978 issue. It's actually the January 1978 issue of Playgirl magazine that he's reading before he goes in to get his caretaker job. And they put it into this movie where Danny's waiting to be interviewed for that same kind of So he's reading the same magazine. Abra's house, the young girl, her house number is 1980, which is the release year of The Shining, which I thought was kind of neat. The name of the cat that enters into the room of the patients, you know what I'm talking about, Sean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They call it Azzy, and which is short for Azrael, who is the angel of death, I guess, which is kind of neat.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice the Dark Tower Easter eggs?
Yeah. There's one very direct where he mentions Ka, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was cool. There's also the bus line that Danny and Abra take called Tet. Did you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
That's cool.
And just so people know, if you haven't read it or don't know much about the Dark Tower series, he refers the gunslinger and his group of followers, helpers, or whatever, his friends, they call themselves a Ka-tet. And Ka is basically like King's word for like karmic debt and things like that. So it's the universe sort of follows this rule of Ka, which basically I think it's just short for karma, basically. And a Ka-tet is a group of people that get together that are bound by Ka. And the villains are actually driving around. It's a group of villains, and they're driving around in a bus that says, what does it say? Tet something. What is it? Anyway, it's got the name Tet Services or something like that on the side of it.
Yeah.
Also, did you read The Dark Tower?
I haven't read all of it yet.
So there's an important number that appears throughout all those films, which is the number 19. And that's the number of the baseball player, the kid. So little things like that were kind of neat.
I love how, like, in the back of my mind, I can think that all Stephen King movies are interconnected in a similar universe.
Yeah, it's very cool. I love that stuff. I mean, Tarantino tends to do it with his films, and I'm always drawn to that.
And then I always do it where I watch a movie like that, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what happened if they had like Rose the Hat versus Pennywise. You know?
yeah, definitely.
So
yeah. When we were kids, I can't remember if you and I talked about it or not, but we always thought it would be fun to have a book. The internet has basically filled this void because you can just find all this stuff on the internet now. But I remember when we were teenagers, we were like, how cool would it be if there was somebody wrote a book called Who Could Take Who and Why? And you just pit together like weird people that would never fight, cross genre,
Yeah.
Who can Luke Skywalker defeat, like put them up against weird people.
We used to do that for fun in college. Like just have like bets on it, and then like people would vote, and it was insanely complicated.
Yeah. One of my favorite ones of all time was I did this on Facebook at one point, and it got a pretty funny response. It was the Chingachgook from Last of the Mohicans versus Hamish's dad in Braveheart. The old guy who gets his hand cut off, but he just keeps fighting. God, if you're a D&D fan, this guy has like 300 hit points. You just can't knock him down.
Nice.
But Chingachgook from Last of the Mohicans he's got that huge like staff knife that he carries around. It's like those two would be a great battle. I think it went to Chingachgook in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. What about Rose the Hat versus Pennywise?
I got to give that to Pennywise.
Yeah, I think he's more of a physical threat for one thing.
Yeah.
And he seems to be way more powerful than Rose the Hat. Way
more. I think I don't even think that those two are really close. Pennywise is like almost like global level power. He's, I mean, maybe that's too much to give him, but a tough one. I think you posed a question recently was Randall Flagg versus Pennywise.
Yeah.
That's maybe a tougher nut to crack, but I think I'd go Randall Flagg on that one too, though.
I think the majority of people were going with Randall Flagg.
Yeah.
And I just, again, love the whole interconnectivity of all the stories.
It's great.
Stephen King does. I love it. So, so you enjoyed it?
I did. Very much. Yep. Highly recommend it. Very, very much recommend it. Yep. Whether, again, it can be, you can have never seen the movie. If you've only read the books, I think you can like it. If you've only seen the film, you'll like it. It's really, really good.
Nice. So actually jumping from the surreal and strange, we're going to take a not even a left or right turn. We're going to go straight down the road into even more strange and surreal with my review of the game Death Stranding. Before I get into it, there was a lot to cover in regards to this game, and I didn't really touch on everything. So I just kind of focused on the main points that I took away from it, that I've been playing for myself and from some reviews from other reviews. And I'm going to, like Derek, trying to keep it as non-spoilery as possible, because I think this game warrants you to explore it in all its amazing strangeness. I'll just put it that way. So Death Stranding came out on November 8th. It was published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. It's a PlayStation 4 exclusive right now. Early in 2020, it will also be coming out on Windows 10. The game is officially described as an action-adventure game. It's produced by Kojima Productions. It's the first game from game director Hideo Kojima, who used to work for and left Konami. In 2015, he left. Konami and Hideo Kojima particularly are best known for the Metal Gear Solid series of games. I don't know if any people are familiar with that. Mm-hmm. But he basically honed his craft of creating his signature Japanese RPG-style storytelling with the Metal Gear series. So while primarily being an adventure game, I would also describe this as it has heavy survival horror elements to it, in both story and gameplay. If you've seen any of the trailers, you can definitely tell that it's got some weird horror style visuals, and it's all pretty intense when you get into the game story. On its surface, it's very artful, almost like an indie-inspired endeavor instead of being more of a AAA endeavor. Unlike anything I can really think of to date that I've played, it is really unique. And it's definitely different than any of the other AAA games on the market right now. The gaming community, though, has been pretty divided and divisive about what they thought of this game, where some people think it's either a masterpiece of game design or a boring, overrated walking simulator. So there's the two ends of the spectrum that people are teetering on. Before I get too much into the story, I'll mention that the game right now is regular price, like $60 for the standard edition. There are 3 other editions. You can go all the way up to the collector's edition for $200, which actually comes with this really cool life-sized BB unit, which is basically that baby in a jar that people have seen in the trailer art, which would be cool if you cosplayed. So the main story of the game, and again, this is just a very high-level observation of it. To really understand it, you really just have to play it. So you play as the main character, Sam Bridges, who is voiced, motion acted, and made to look just like actor Norman Reedus. Sam he's a porter or deliverer of goods in a broken America, which has literally been torn apart by a cataclysmic supernatural event called the Death Stranding, which not only destroyed American civilization, but all civilizations around the world. The people who survived the Death Stranding now live in isolated knot cities, KNOT, funny similarity of stories there. They're completely cut off from each other. There's no communication. There's no real traveling between cities. So people are just sort of stranded in these isolated pockets of humanity across the country. Sam has been contracted by an organization known as Bridges. No coincidence to his last name, because actually people's last names in this game, in this world, are connected to people they're either affiliated with or working for. So Sam's full name is actually Sam Porter Bridges. So I thought was interesting. It's his responsibility now to bring America back together by traveling to and connecting each knot city via a strange ethereal bond of information sharing called the Chiral Network. As Sam crosses the country, bringing people together, he does have to avoid these creatures that have been left behind in the wake of the Death Stranding, caught between the world of the living and the dead, and they're called BTs, short for beached things. I know, it gets even stranger. Luckily, Sam is afflicted with a rare condition called DOOMS, DOOMS. it's from the after effect of being imbued with a reality-bending substance known as chiralium, which has been only known to exist only after the events of the Death Stranding. Dooms allows Sam to sense the presence of BTs, which helps him avoid them. Dooms itself is measured in levels, and different people have different levels of Dooms, which gives them more powerful and unique abilities as their level gets higher. Sam is actually a level 2 at the beginning of the game, which means he can sense the BTs, but he can't see them. He does meet another porter, a woman named Fragile, and her character is played by actress Lea Seydoux. She's a higher level Dooms carrier where she's able to see BTs as well as being able to transport, instantaneously teleport from place to place via a multi-dimensional shortcut through what's called the beach. So yeah, we're getting even weirder. So one of the things that people realize after the events of the Death Stranding is anyone who dies in the world now without their body being burned will undergo a transformation called necrosis. And at the end of it, they will spawn a new BT. Even worse, if these BTs catches a living human and consumes them, they trigger what's called a void out. And that's described as a antimatter explosion. Big enough, if one person is caught, it's big enough to level an entire city, and it leaves a huge crater in its wake. There are also these human factions that Sam has to deal with as well. One of them is called the Mules, M-U-L-E-S. They are porters or former porters who have become, quote unquote, delivery addicts. And they will harass you and try to steal your cargo because all they live for is for the delivery, which is very, very strange. Worse than that, though, there's a terrorist faction that exists called the Homo Demons. They are a radical individualist organization, and they are working towards hampering humanity's efforts at reconnecting, going as far as setting off old world nukes inside these not cities to purposely manufacture voidouts. They are the nemesis of the UCA, or the United Cities of America, which is the newly formed American government after this disaster. So yeah, that's the high level plot of the story, and it all is very, very, very confusing. So it gets a little easier to understand when you're into the gameplay, such as I'll back it up a little bit. More of the cheeky reviewers of the game have described this game as an extreme UPS simulator. And the funny part of that is they're not really wrong. The majority of the game is having Sam take delivery orders from one place, taking that cargo and packages to another place, and delivering them as quickly as possible with as little damage to the parcels as possible, which is actually unlike UPS. But then taking more delivery orders from that new location, delivering them somewhere else, and then sometimes taking deliveries from that place to the very place you started at the very beginning, and over and over and over. That is the main mechanic of the game. So in addition to the delivery mechanic, there's also a terrain traversal mechanic that plays an important, or at least at the very least, a necessary element to gameplay. Sam travels across the entire country, walking a lot of it along the way, but eventually you're able to unlock vehicles, which makes it a little faster. The maps in each level are huge and expansive and gorgeous to look at. I mean, it's like a painting. Literally realist, best painting you've ever seen of the countryside. The terrain is sometimes easy to navigate, and sometimes it's supposed to be not so easy to navigate, and sometimes it's really treacherous. So you actually run the risk of stumbling and crashing and damaging your parcels as you traverse the countryside. So to help you, they give you a scanner on your shoulder called an Odra deck that you can scan the terrain ahead of you to see if it's safe or not. Or if you're crossing a stream, it will tell you how deep the stream is, if you can actually ford it safely or not, which I thought was an interesting new mechanic. I hadn't really seen anything like that in a game up until now. So when you're playing and you first encounter the BTs, your only real means of dealing with them is by trying to sneak around them and trying not to be noticed. So the stealth mechanic in the game from what I've researched, is very similar to those who may be familiar with Kojima's work in Metal Gear and that series of game. It's a lot of stealth mechanics, trying to sneak around enemies. Later on in the game, you're able to recreate non-lethal weapons to fend them off, with which the mechanic involved to create them is one of the really more strange, odd, and unique twists in the game. So scientists have figured out how to process the sweat, urine, and feces from Doom's carriers like Sam into grenades that repel BTs. So you're basically armed with pee-pee and poo-poo bombs, basically. It's actually particularly effective with Sam's fluids because he is a repatriate, which is described as one who's actually died and come back and not set off a void out. And apparently why he didn't set off a void out is explained later on in the story. An interesting obstacle that you do come across, as well as a phenomenon called timefall. It's basically these rainstorms that whenever the raindrops hit you, it instantly ages that object. It will like make grass grow and die and regrow in like a matter of seconds. It kills wildlife by, making them age instantly. It will erode the packages you're carrying, like acid rain. And if you're not covered by special rain gear, it will age you as well. So, and it's from the story aspect, after the Death Stranding, this chiralium material that afflicts Doom's carriers has been blown into the atmosphere and is somehow causing this effect, which is interesting. So with the human enemies, it's very similar with the BTs early on in the game, where you basically try to just avoid them. You really can't protect yourself really well. You have no real weapons except the cargo containers that you can hit people with. Later on in the game, you do also get more effective non-lethal weapons to defend yourself against the humans, like a bolo gun that ties up enemies, and eventually a machine gun that shoots tranquilizer bullets. The obvious story reason for the weapons being all non-lethal is to avoid creating more BTs and void outs. But on a more subtle level, and I think for the kind of story that Kojima is trying to tell, is the theme of non-violence, and that's very prevalent in the story. There is a robust inventory management system that the players get to use and build up over time. There's a lot more to it than I want to really get into, but the basics are you're given delivery packages at distribution centers. You can take them directly to the destinations, or you can store them in a private locker, or you can recycle them for their basic materials. And also you can even get a piece of equipment and create your own post boxes, like postal boxes out in the world that act as mini distribution hubs. So you can like build the network of where these packages can be picked up and delivered. One of the more unique things, though, is you can actually share your packages with other players, even though it's a single player game, which I'll get to in a second. The most well-known and at the same time one of the most mysterious aspects of the game is this baby that's attached to your body, the baby in the little jar, yellow jar. It's called a BB, which is short for bridge baby. It's really one of the strangest things in the game, but also super fascinating from a storytelling aspect. And I don't want to give away too much about the BB because it tells you more about it in exposition as you play. But it's basically able to detect BTs much better than Sam can, and you attach it to your Odredeck scanner so that Sam can actually see the BTs. With all that aside, the most unique game mechanic, I think, is a way you can interact with other players, even though it's a single player game. While it's absolutely a single player experience and you don't have anyone else playing in the same game as you, you're going through the world landscape completely alone, but you do get these subtle hints, these little meaningful tidbits of interaction from other players who are playing the same game. For example, you may be climbing a really steep hill to get to one of your delivery locations, and you're just really having a tough time. And then all of a sudden you come across a signpost that says, keep on going, or you got this. And it's, something that was left by another player who went the same way as you did. Or maybe you're about to enter a location without being too careful. You're not really paying attention. And someone left you a warning sign saying that there are BTs in the area.
Is it automated, or are they actually leaving you those messages?
These are from actual other players in their game, playing their own game, that can leave these posts in their world that travel into your world.
That's great.
That's
So I think that's really kind of, I don't know if it's truly innovative, because I think maybe other games might have touched on it, but the way to use it in this, I think, is really unique. So eventually, not only signposts, but you can also share materials, vehicles, weapons, and even deliver each other's packages eventually, which is really kind of cool. So those are the main points I wanted to hit as far as gameplay. There's some other gameplay nuances that I could go into, but for the sake of time, I figured I'd just skip over those. And, if you play the game, you'll get to experience them firsthand. As far as my initial impressions of the game, it was a tough sell at the beginning for me. I did not automatically get into it right away. I'll start with the good stuff though. The visuals of the game are literally the best on current gen console. It's the best looking game I've played to date. The only game that comes close is Horizon Zero Dawn, and this blows that out of the water. The character models, the environments, the animations, the realistic weathering on items and the terrain, all the way down to the little hairs and pores on your character's face just look amazing. I think having Norman Reedus in the game as the main protagonist is a surprisingly great fit. At the beginning, I wasn't sure what I was expecting out of him being Sam, but the writing and his performance in the game is really cool.
I was looking at the production notes, and I noticed one of my other favorite actors is in there too. Mads Mikkelsen's in it.
Yep.
He's
oh my
awesome.
God, he is awesome, and he's totally top tier acting in this as well. There are a lot of cutscenes, definitely more than you would probably like, Derek.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other really big name actors in this, like Troy Baker's in it. They have Margaret Qualley, Tommy Earl Jenkins, Lindsay Wagner, the Bionic Woman, is in this.
Cool.
And they use the visual image of Guillermo del Toro, who's voiced by another actor, though. They even have some cameos by some interesting people, like Conan O'Brien is in this game.
Really?
And it just has a little cameo, but it's definitely him riffing his little jokes and stuff. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking here. It says that the likenesses of, like you just said, Guillermo del Toro and Nicholas Winding Refn, the director. He's a very good director. He did. It's funny because he's connected to Mads Mikkelsen also. They do a lot of some of their films together. And anyway, that's interesting. He's also the director of Drive, which I absolutely love that movie.
I bet a lot of Mads Mikkelsen probably mentioned that he was in the game to him, and it's oh, that's pretty cool. And maybe they were like, hey, maybe you want to be in it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But it's really cool. And, of course, Hideo Kojima is in it as one of the characters, although it's not him. It's, he's playing someone else, and they have an American voice, this version of it. But it's all really cool to see how realistic these characters are and how close they are to the people that are playing them. It's really mesmerizing and really cool.
That's cool.
So the story by far is the biggest draw to the game for me. It's really, really, really fantastic. It's truly a sci-fi horror thriller in my mind, that if it was done as well as all the cutscenes, would make an amazing movie. Again, getting into that thing where you had mentioned where, some games are probably made by these people who want to be movie directors.
Yeah.
I don't think Hideo Kojima is that, but he definitely could be a movie director if this is the stuff he's pumping out. But I'm completely invested in the story and lore. I don't even mind having to stop the flow of the game to read the little pieces of information that you get as you unlock them, in the forms of emails and info drops. I just want more of it. The story is just that compelling. But now, switching gears, as much as there are good things to say about the game, it's still not for everyone. The beginning of the game is very, very, very cutscene heavy, to the point where I was almost saying, okay, am I going to get to play soon? So it was hard. It was a hard pill to swallow. That on top of the first hour or two of gameplay is extremely grindy, almost to the point of being boring. It could easily turn people off, like in the first 2 to 3 hours. Also, the game is admittedly very weird and strange, and some of the themes are just really out there. And it also really pushes this narrative of loneliness and a need to connect, which if you get through the beginning, it really pays off in the end. So all that said, once I got past the first 3 to 4 hours of some painful playing, I was totally hooked after that. I've so far played about 12 to 15 hours. And from what I've gathered, the game, if you mainline it, has well over 40 to 50 plus hours of content easily. And if you do all of your little side deliveries and missions, you could stretch it to like 70 or 80 hours. So you're definitely getting your money's worth as far as content. And I'm at a point where the side missions are becoming addictive. Like I'm becoming a mule. Like I just want to deliver packages. Like it's so cool. And then there are things where like you can help people build roads to make the deliveries more efficient by using vehicles. And it takes a long time. You have to get all these materials and transport them to these different places. But it's sort of like a Zen meditative kind of repetitiveness to it now, which might sound bad, but to me, it's like so rewarding.
That's pretty cool.
And overall, my final thoughts on the game is it's obviously not everyone's cup of tea, but it's definitely grown on me, and I'm loving it right now. If you're a fan of typical action RPGs like Tomb Raider or first-person shooters like Call of Duty, you're probably not going to like this game. But if you are truly open to a unique gaming experience, I say give it a shot.
Does it have a leveling mechanic to it, or is it like you're the same?
It does. So the mechanic itself has a lot of in-depth algorithms, I'd say, as far as scoring to get you to level up. And every level, you become a different level of a porter or transporter or master mover. Like the more you deliver stuff and the quicker you do it and the stuff is less damaged, and the more helpful things you do, like delivering other people's packages or leaving signs, stuff like that, help to level you up as well. And as you do, you unlock equipment that makes your job a little easier. Like you'll eventually unlock sort of like a exoskeleton that you can wear that makes it easier to carry heavier loads and makes you run faster. You can also eventually unlock like a trike or a truck. So it does help. You do level up over time and you get rewarded by certain items and abilities.
Okay. You have me intrigued. I think I might check this one out.
I'd say if you could just muscle through that first 2 to 3 hours, I think you would love it on like definitely an artistic standpoint, like the movie type aspect of it, but also the gameplay itself just gets really surprisingly rewarding and addictive as it goes on.
Huh, that's pretty cool.
I don't know if I could get through like 3 or 4 hours of not enjoying something. But then again, I mean...
It's very anti-intuitive, yes.
Yeah. I've spent about 25 hours playing the new Pokemon game, so I probably shouldn't say much. But yeah.
Look, just don't enjoy this thing for 4 hours.
and then you'll love it.
Go into it knowing you'll hate it, and you'll probably
like a lot of things in life.
Yeah, that's true.
But like I was saying, the gaming community is pretty divided on it. Right now, I think it's rated at a 70 to 80 on Metacritic, which is good, but it's not great, considering it's been hyped so much and people have been expecting it for a long time. But I think it's just that whole initial learning curve that is throwing people. And I think a lot of people who are reviewing it are fans of traditional RPGs and first-person shooters. And maybe just, I don't want to say they don't get it, but maybe that's part of, like, it's just maybe too ethereal or, I don't know.
Yeah.
Too out there.
Yeah. But I say give it a shot.
Cool.
So, yeah, I think we'll wrap it up. Did you guys have any final thoughts on any of the stuff we covered?
No, I had to have one more quick question though. What platform did you play it on?
Oh, right now it's only on PlayStation 4.
Oh, it's just PlayStation 4.
It's an exclusive for PlayStation 4. In March, I think, of 2020, it's going to come out for Windows 10 PCs.
Okay.
So you could play it on computer. Hopefully, people won't get the story spoiled by then. But there's definitely something to look forward to if you're going to play it on computer.
Cool.
But yeah, so I actually was playing it just before the podcast, and I think I'll go have a sandwich and then keep playing it.
Yeah, I might
afterwards.
go download that, even though I absolutely do not have time to be doing it right now. But I think I might go do it anyway.
At least in the beginning, you can kind of just run it as a movie with all the cutscenes.
Yeah, right.
You don't really have to sit there and do anything.
Before I can start delivering my packages to people.
Right, exactly.
It's good.
It's rewarding. All right. Let's see. So anything upcoming that you guys want to plug or mention?
I don't think I have anything new coming up. I guess if I'm going to keep pushing Battleground Games and Hobbies, I'll mention that we're going to have some Black Friday sales that if you're into gaming, definitely check out any of our 3 locations. We'll be doing some really cool Black Friday sales. We usually announce them on social media the week, like early Thanksgiving week. So you can look for that, I guess, early Monday or Tuesday of next week, right?
Yeah. Do you guys do, isn't there like a small business Saturday or something like that?
Yeah, so I probably shouldn't call it Black Friday anymore because people tend to aim for the big dogs on Black Friday, right? Like if people go to look to buy TVs or really big expensive items, we're not usually the first place they're thinking of. So we basically have Black Friday weekend, which, yeah, like you mentioned, is also called Small Business Saturday, but we usually ride our sale out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Of course, you're risking cool stuff being gone if you wait till Sunday. But I would definitely recommend aiming for Friday or Saturday if you want to check out what we're doing. But we usually run the sales all weekend long.
Do you run out there on Black Friday, Jesse, and do tons of shopping?
No, actually, after having a husband work in retail and be kind of, how Massachusetts starts it earlier and earlier, he would have to miss Thanksgiving because of Black Friday openings. So I just don't bother. I'm planning on going